Hi, and thanks for joining us here at Rose Quartz Mediumship podcast, where we simply adore anything and everything healing and metaphysically based. The other night, my husband and I were laying in bed, and we just finished meditating, and I was telling him about something that I was proud of. And it was a little thing, it was nothing important. But I'm a huge believer that we should celebrate anything and everything that we can inside of our lives. And I think that when we do that, it shifts the frequency that we function from. And I was in a very kind of childlike energy coming out of a meditation. And so the energy that I was bringing had a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of play, and some innocence to it. And he responded to me and said, "I am proud of you, babe." And I laid there and I was thinking, isn't it funny that we get the ability to create any kind of story that we want in our mind? And so I said to him just that. Isn't it funny that I could create a story where you're being condescending and you're in some manner mocking or minimizing my celebration of myself? Or I could create a story that you are genuinely proud of me and you're genuinely happy. And I get to pick. And this is the funny thing, is that if I don't share with him the story that I created in my mind, it's just the truth for me. If I create a story that he is mocking me or minimizing me or being in some manner negative, then I'm going to hold that story in my mind. I'm going to carry that with me as if it is the truth because it's the one that I chose. And if I decide that he is celebrating with me and he is genuinely proud of me and he's happy and he's excited for me, I'm probably never going to have that conversation with him, but I'm going to carry with me this story that he's celebrating me. And if I don't ever share with him what's going on in my mind, I just have that truth about that experience. And I don't have any more details or facts to support the story that I've created or dismantle the story that I have created. And so I was having that conversation with him and saying how funny it is to be human, that we get the ability to do this and we do it all day, every day. We create stories in our mind that sometimes serve us and that sometimes don't. But there's typically a theme to the kind of story that we create. We create the same kind of story over and over again in our mind. And the majority of the time, we actually don't have enough details to know whether or not that story is accurate or inaccurate. And so we're laying there having this conversation, and he says, "Well, I sure hope that you created the story that I was actually proud of you and that I wasn't mocking you." And I laugh. And it is the truth. That is the story that I had created, is that he was genuinely happy for me. Because this is the thing. I get to pick how I want to feel. And if I want to feel inadequate, then I'm going to create a story that I'm somehow less than, and he's mocking me, and that he is being facetious. But that's not how I wanted to feel. So I created the story in my mind that he was genuinely happy for me. And we were laying there kind of giggling about how funny the human experience is. And I said, for example, when you go to the grocery store and you come back and we're unloading groceries and you're being maybe a little bit distant or standoffish or cold or distracted or introspective, I could create a story that you are somehow irritated that you had to go to the grocery store and go grocery shopping. And I could have this whole story, this juicy story going in my mind about how Every time you come back from the grocery store, you're distant and you're pissy and you're not wanting to engage with me. And it could really be that you're being introspective. Maybe you've had time driving to and from the grocery store and you're thinking about something and it has nothing to do with me. But I've created this whole story in my mind that you're irritated that you're the one who's going grocery shopping, right? I have this enormous story. And so I'm laying there kind of processing and dialoguing this. And he says back to me, is that what happens? When I go to the grocery store, do I come home pissy? And I start dying. I am laughing so hard that I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. I could pee my pants, except for I'm not wearing them because I'm in bed, right? And I was like, you're doing it. You're doing it actively in this moment. And I said, do you want to know what's really funny? Is that when you go to the grocery store, I'm typically with clients. So I don't actually meet you coming back from the grocery store. I made that whole thing up. And can you like really pull back from this situation and recognize that it is pretty rare that I help you unpack the groceries because I'm with clients. So this is a fabricated story as an example, but then you created your own story in your mind that somehow that is what I am thinking and that somehow you are pissy. And then now you're sitting here thinking about what it is that makes you pissy at the grocery store. And the whole thing was made up. And I am cackling, okay? I'm laughing so hard, I am cackling. Like, I am kicking my feet, I am squirming in the bed, cackling. I'm laughing so hard. And I'm just like dying. I'm like, can you see it? Like, in this moment, you are doing it. You are creating a story and you are projecting that story onto me as if it is my story. I fabricated that whole thing. And then you created a story around my fabrication and what it meant, right? Because that's what humans will do. We will take a small number of facts and we'll create a story around those facts. And that's what creates the meaning in the human experience, is the kind of stories that you tell. So I'm laughing at my husband saying, like, you're telling a story to yourself that is not true. And he is also hysterically laughing and is like, shit, fuck, oh, shit, right? Cackling. I'm absolutely cackling at him. And he is like swearing and laughing and recognizing that he's still doing it as we're unpacking the fact that he's doing it. I'm like, look at the kind of story you're telling yourself. Does that serve you? Is that the kind of story you want to tell yourself? I just made that up. And then you made up this ridiculous story around my story. And so once we're kind of like done laughing, I said, we should really create a podcast around this. It's silent for a moment. And he goes, what, so you can belittle me? And I start dying laughing. I mean, I'm like dying, absolutely dying. I'm like, you are doing it. You're doing it in this moment. You're creating the same story. You are creating the same story that I want to publicly belittle you. That is the story you are creating. That is the meaning that you are making out of this experience. And I said, what's actually true is that I thought that it was such an easy example for people to be able to see and digest, and that they might be able to recognize the truth of this and be able to self-reflect. And so really the reason that I wanted to create a podcast around this is because I thought that it would be so incredibly helpful for people to understand themselves and the way that they move through the world through an example of someone else where it doesn't have to be about them, right? I'm a huge believer that oftentimes we can see a mirror when it's somebody else's story or somebody else's example. And if you really kind of follow the content that comes out of Rose Quartz Mediumship, the majority of what I do in blog posts or in podcasts is storytelling. And I'm telling you stories about my life, but there is always a lesson in them. And you can choose to look at that lesson through me and my experience or not. right? And there'll be some lessons that land and there'll be some that don't. And that is the way that I choose to teach because I love it. I love storytelling. I genuinely do. And so I'm laying there saying to my husband, this is the thing, is that what I was actually thinking and feeling was what a beautiful learning and teaching opportunity this is. And the story that you created about me, is that I was going to belittle you or minimize you or make you feel small or less than. But this is just your own internal dialogue that you're projecting on me. I'm a blank canvas, and you are painting your own story about who I am. And you are addressing your own trauma through projection onto me. And so we're both laying there laughing, recognizing the depths of the stories that were happening in that moment. And that frequently, we don't actually know. The majority of the time, we do not stop and ask people what they meant. We just make an assumption. And 99% of the time, it's just our own stuff. And so internally, if we feel great about ourselves, then we'll create the story that they were doing this from the most beautiful and loving place. And that's the story that we create about them and their intention. But it's really our story. And if we feel inadequate, then we will project a story of inadequacy, that they must find us inadequate. And we will paint that onto the blank canvas that they hold for us to look in. And so I thought this was a really fun topic to chat about. And maybe there's a mirror, maybe there's a lesson, maybe there's something that you learn, or maybe you just get to giggle about our fun experience that we had the other night in bed. We really, really genuinely love having you here with us at Rose Quartz Mediumship Podcast. And I hope you have a beautiful morning, day, evening, or night, wherever it is that this podcast finds you. And I hope that you're creating stories that serve you and that align with the frequency of the experiences that you want to have.